Hello everyone. Welcome to Unit 2, Writing a Sentence. Today, we are going to talk about Section 1, Sentence Patterns and Clause Types. Part 1, Sentence Patterns. A sentence is a group of words that you use to communicate your ideas. Every sentence is formed by one or more clauses, and it should express a complete thought. So, what are clauses? Clauses are the building blocks of sentences. A clause is a group of words that contain at least a subject and a verb. There are two kinds of clauses. 1. Independent clauses. 2. Dependent clauses. Look at the following examples. Do you know which one is independent and which one is dependent? I need some advice on which computer to buy. When you buy a new computer, you usually get a software included at no extra cost. The first sentence contains one clause, and the clause has a subject I and a verb need. It is an independent clause. In the second sentence, there are two clauses. When you buy a new computer is a clause, and you usually get a software included at no extra cost is another clause. The former is a dependent clause, and the latter is an independent clause. What are the differences between an independent clause and a dependent clause? An independent clause contains a subject and a verb and expresses a complete thought. It can stand alone as a sentence by itself. For example, Jim studied the whole week for his chemistry exam. Then, what is a dependent clause? A dependent clause begins with a subordinator such as when, while, because, if, although, or who. A dependent clause does not express a complete thought, so it is not a sentence by itself. You will make a mistake if you let a dependent clause stand alone. For example, because Jim studied the whole week for his chemistry exam, although she joined the company only a year ago. These two examples are not complete sentences because they have only a dependent clause, so they are wrong sentences. To write a correct and a complete sentence, you need to add an independent clause to the dependent clause. For example, because Jim studied the whole week for his chemistry exam, he passed the exam. Although she joined the company only a year ago, she's already been promoted twice. To sum up, an independent clause forms a complete sentence on its own, while a dependent clause needs an independent clause to make a complete and correct sentence. Now, you know there are two kinds of clauses. Do you know how many kinds of sentences there are? Depending on their structure, English sentences can be classified into the following four types. 1. Simple sentences. 2. Compound sentences. 3. Complex sentences. 4. Compound complex sentences. By learning these sentence types, you can add complexity and variation to your sentences. Now, let's look at them one by one. 1. A simple sentence has one independent clause and no dependent clauses. Mary's aunt enjoyed traveling with her friends. One of his first animated films was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Both sentences have only one independent clause, so they are simple sentences. 2. A compound sentence has two or more independent clauses, but no dependent clauses, and the clauses are connected either by a coordinator, such as and, but, or, nor, for, so, yet, or by a semicolon. For example, many French dishes are basically simple, but they can take a long time to prepare. Nuclear accidents can happen, so nuclear power plants should have strict safety controls. Motherhood causes some women to quit their jobs. Others continue working despite having young children to care for. This was not an easy decision. However, it was the best decision. The first two sentences contain two independent clauses connected by a comma and a coordinate, but so. The last two sentences also contain two independent clauses, but the two clauses are connected by a semicolon. All four sentences are compound sentences. 3. A complex sentence has one independent clause and at least one dependent clause. For example, because the storm knocked out the power, school will be closed tomorrow. I have the greatest respect for his ideas, although I don't agree with them. In the first sentence, because the storm knocked out the power is a dependent clause. School will be closed tomorrow is an independent clause. In the second sentence, I have the greatest respect for his ideas is an independent clause. Although I don't agree with them is a dependent clause. Both sentences have one independent clause and one dependent clause, so they are complex sentences. 4. A compound complex sentence is made up of two independent clauses and one or more dependent clauses. For example, even though she was tired, Becky knew she had to finish the race and she had to run to meet her team. Kate doesn't like cartoons because they are loud, so she doesn't watch them. In the first sentence, even though she was tired is a dependent clause. It forms a part of a complex sentence. Becky knew she had to finish the race and she had to run to meet her team contains two independent clauses and is a compound sentence. Since this sentence has both one dependent clause and two independent clauses, it is a compound complex sentence. In the second sentence, Kate doesn't like cartoons is an independent clause. Because they are loud is a dependent clause. So, Kate doesn't like cartoons because they are loud is a complex sentence. The part, so she doesn't watch them, is another independent clause, or part of a compound sentence. This makes the whole sentence a compound complex sentence. Part 2. Clause types. We have just learned that the building blocks of a sentence are clauses. According to their structure, clauses are of two types, independent and dependent clauses. Now, let's focus on dependent clauses and their functions in complex sentences. In a complex sentence, there must be at least one dependent clause. Dependent clauses can function in a sentence as nouns, adjectives, or adverbs, and are therefore called noun clauses, adjective clauses, and adverb clauses respectively. 1. Noun clauses function as nouns in the sentence, and they can be used as subjugates, objects, and objects of prepositions. Look at the following examples. The underlined part in each sentence is a noun clause. What is most important to him is his family. That critic writes that Al Purdy is the birth poet in Canada. She's very suspicious about what he said at the meeting. 2. Adverb clauses function as adverbs in the sentence. Adverb clauses modify verbs, adjectives, or adverbs. They may be used to describe how, why, when, where things happen. Depending on the function of the clause, conjunctions used before it include although, after, if, because, while, since, whether, etc. Look at the following examples. The underlined part in each sentence is an adverb clause. When I arrived at the university, classes had already started. Time. I found my English dictionary where I had left it. Place. Alex was happy because he received a good grade on his history exam course. He drove fast so that he could get to work on time. Purpose. If she doesn't won the lottery, she would have bought such a nice car. Condition. Although he thought he was a good driver, he got a lot of tickets for speeding. Concession. 3. Adjective clauses start with a relative pronoun such as who, whom, whose, which, or that, and function as adjectives. Adjective clauses modify a noun or a sentence. The relative pronoun refers to the noun or sentence it modifies, and the noun or sentence usually precedes it directly. Look at the following examples. The underlined part in each sentence is an adjective clause. The woman who bought the red dress is my neighbor. The problem that he had tried his best to resolve was a difficult one. A tall building was put up at the place where there used to be a desert. That red dress, which is my favorite, was expensive. He didn't come to my birthday party, which disappointed me. The above adjective clauses are not exactly the same. They can be classified into two types, restrictive and non-restrictive. 1. Restrictive adjective clauses. If there are no commas used before and after an adjective clause, the information in the clause is essential to the sentence. This kind of adjective clauses is called a restrictive adjective clause. For example, the woman who bought the red dress is my neighbor. The problem that he had tried his best to resolve was a difficult one. A tall building was put up at the place where there used to be a desert. The underlined parts in the three examples are essential for us to understand the meaning of the sentences. If they are omitted, the sentences are harder to understand or even make no sense. 2. Non-restrictive adjective clauses. In the second kind of adjective clauses, there are commas before and after the clause, meaning that the information in the clause is not essential to the sentence. This kind of adjective clauses is called a non-restrictive adjective clause. For example, that red dress, which is my favorite, was expensive. He didn't come to my birthday party, which disappointed me. In the first example, if we omit which is my favorite, the sentence, that red dress was expensive, still makes sense. So, which is my favorite is a non-restrictive clause. Similarly, if we remove which disappointed me from the second sentence, people can still understand He didn't come to my birthday party. Therefore, the adjective clause is not essential. Finally, what kind of sentences should you use more often? What is the good writing style? Here are 2 tips. First, the type of sentence you write depends on the kind of ideas you want to express. When you want to show that ideas are equal, use compound sentences. When your ideas are not equal, use complex sentences to show the relationship of subordination. Second, you should develop a good writing style by mixing sentence types. If you use only one sentence pattern, your writing will be boring and may not convey the message that you intend to convey.